The first thing I noticed was the silence. Not the kind where people are respectfully listening. This was the tight, uncomfortable kind, like everyone had just witnessed something they weren't supposed to. I was standing by the punch bowl, holding a sweating glass of ginger ale, when I heard Clarissa's voice cut through the tension. She was at the center of the patio, wine glass raised high, smiling that too wide smile she gets when she's already 3 drinks in. "To my real friends," she said, loud enough to carry over the music. "The ones who've been there for me when certain people haven't." The certain people part hung in the air like smoke. Heads turned. Eyes flicked toward me. I swear I even heard someone laugh under their breath. I tried to tell myself it wasn't about me. That would have been easier if she hadn't locked eyes with me as she took a slow, deliberate sip. I don't remember much after that. Just the taste of flat ginger ale and the strange, shrinking feeling you get when you realize you're the punchline and you didn't even know there was a joke. 2 days later, she texted me like nothing had happened. "Hey, did you want me to grab milk on the way home?" Smiley face. I thought that was the end of it. Turns out, it was only the opening scene of something much, much worse. The morning after that text about milk, I almost convinced myself I was overreacting about the party. People make bad jokes, right? Maybe Clarissa had just miscalculated. But that uneasy knot in my chest wouldn't go away. It didn't help that she was suddenly spending an unusual amount of time, working late, or catching up with friends. 3 nights later, she said she was meeting a client for a quick drink downtown. I wasn't trying to spy. I swear I wasn't. But I happened to be near the same block, coming back from grabbing takeout. That's when I saw her through the wide-open windows of this fancy little bar, lit up like a scene from a movie. She wasn't sitting with a client. She was leaning across a candlelit table towards some guy I'd never seen before, her hand on his wrist like she'd been telling him something very personal. He wasn't just listening. He was looking at her the way I used to, before, whatever this is. I could have walked in. I could have confronted her. Instead, I froze outside like an idiot, half hidden behind a lamppost, telling myself I'd misread everything. And then I heard it. The bar had music playing, but between songs, her laugh cut through the air, and so did her voice. Unlike at home, where I'm basically invisible, the guy said something back that I couldn't hear, and she leaned even closer. It was one of those moments where your body feels too small for your own heart, like it's trying to claw its way out. I walked away before I did something I'd regret. When she came home that night, she was all smiles, holding a little paper bag with a slice of cheesecake. "Thought you could use a treat," she said, kissing my cheek like she'd just come from Bible study. I didn't mention what I saw. Not yet. But the next day, something arrived on my phone that made me realize the party toast wasn't just a bad joke. It was the first warning shot. The next morning started off painfully normal. Clarissa was in the kitchen making coffee, humming some off-key tune like she didn't have a care in the world. I sat at the table pretending to scroll through emails, still trying to convince myself that what I'd seen at the bar wasn't as bad as it looked. But then my phone buzzed. No name, just a random number I didn't recognize. The message contained a single attachment. I opened it without thinking. It was a photo. Not just any photo. Clarissa, standing on the very same bar patio from 3 nights ago, leaning into that guy. His face was partially turned away, but hers wasn't. She had her hand on his chest, her head tilted toward him in a way that didn't leave much to the imagination. And the worst part? She was wearing my scarf. The one I'd given her last winter after she accidentally lost the one from her sister. The text underneath the photo was short. "You really don't know, do you?" I sat there frozen, coffee cooling in front of me, Clarissa clinking spoons against her mug like nothing in the world was wrong. My mind started spiraling. Who sent it? Why? Was this some kind of sick joke? I didn't confront her right away. Instead, I replied to the number, "Who is this?" No answer. I called straight to voicemail. My hands were shaking, and I realized it wasn't just from anger. It was fear. That night, Clarissa said she was going to yoga. Normally, I wouldn't have cared, but the way she avoided my eyes while saying it made my stomach twist. I waited 15 minutes, then checked the location tracker we still had on each other's phones from years back. She wasn't at the yoga studio. She was at a place I didn't recognize, a street on the far edge of town, near the industrial district. I sat in the dark, staring at the dot on the screen, wondering if I had the guts to go see for myself. I sat in the driveway for a good 10 minutes before deciding I couldn't just sit there and watch that blinking dot on my phone taunt me. Clarissa had never once in our marriage been to that part of town, and I couldn't think of a single reason she would be there now, yoga mat or not. The industrial district wasn't the sort of place you accidentally ended up. It was warehouses, repair shops, and rows of chain-link fences topped with barbed wire. When I finally pulled up to the street, the air felt different. Heavy. The kind of quiet that makes you check over your shoulder even when there's no one there. I parked half a block away from where the tracker said she was and started walking, trying to look casual, like I wasn't following anyone. The location stopped moving right outside a nondescript brick building with no sign, just a black metal door and a small light above it. 2 cars were parked out front. One was Clarissa's sedan, the other a sleek black SUV with tinted windows. I didn't recognize it, but something about it made my stomach clench. I couldn't see inside from where I stood, so I lingered across the street, pretending to check my phone. After about 5 minutes, the door opened just a crack. I caught a glimpse of her, Clarissa, stepping out into the cold air, smiling in a way I hadn't seen in years. She turned back toward someone inside, said something I couldn't hear, then leaned forward like she was whispering. Then he appeared. Same guy from the bar, only now I could see him clearly. He was taller than I realized, with the kind of tailored coat you don't just pick up at a mall. He stepped close to her, so close that for a second I thought they might kiss, but instead he put his hand on the back of her neck and said something low enough that I couldn't catch it. Whatever it was made her laugh, quietly, intimately, like they were sharing some private joke. I felt my hands ball into fists in my pockets. I wanted to storm across the street, demand answers, shout something, anything. But I didn't. I just stood there, half hidden in the shadows, feeling like I was watching my life peel away from me. Before I could make a move, they both slipped back inside, the door closing with a final, hollow thud. And then, as I stood there deciding what to do next, my phone buzzed again. Another message from that same unknown number. This time, it wasn't a photo. It was 6 words. If you want the truth, wait. I stayed in my car for what felt like an eternity after that message came through, staring at those 6 words glowing on my screen. If you want the truth, wait. It felt like a challenge, or a warning, or both. My instinct screamed to barge into that brick building and drag Clarissa out, but my brain was whispering something colder. If someone knows enough to send you that picture, they might know more than you ever wanted to find out. I kept my headlights off, parked far enough away to look like I belonged to another street entirely. The air was icy, and every so often I'd catch myself glancing at the black SUV, wondering if its tinted windows were hiding the person who sent me those messages. At one point, I even considered knocking on it, but the thought of the door opening and me being face-to-face with some stranger who knew my wife's secrets made my stomach churn. An hour passed, then 2. My mind wandered into places I didn't want it to go. Clarissa's laugh from the party, her hand on that man's wrist at the bar, the way she looked at him tonight. But mixed in with the anger was something worse, dread. Because whoever sent me those texts wasn't acting like they wanted to help me out of kindness. It felt calculated. It was close to midnight when movement finally caught my eye. The black SUV started up, engine low and smooth, and rolled slowly past me. I leaned back so far in my seat it must have looked ridiculous, trying to avoid being seen. It turned the corner and disappeared into the night without a glance in my direction. Then the brick building's door opened again. Clarissa stepped out, alone this time, glancing briefly over her shoulder before heading to her car. I noticed something clutched in her hand, a small manila envelope, thick enough to bulge slightly. She didn't get in the driver's seat right away. Instead, she sat there in the cold, staring down at whatever was inside the envelope. A faint glow from her phone lit her face, but I couldn't see her expression clearly. I thought about tailing her, but she drove off in the opposite direction of home, and by the time I decided to follow, I'd lost her in traffic. I drove back, pulse still hammering, only to find another text waiting on my phone. No photo this time, just a location pin dropped in the middle of nowhere, outside city limits, with a single line of text beneath it. Tomorrow, 9 p.m. Come alone. I sat there in the driveway staring at that pin, knowing 2 things with absolute certainty. 1, Clarissa was hiding something massive, and 2, I was already too far in to back out now. I didn't sleep much after getting that location pin. I lay there in bed, Clarissa asleep beside me, breathing slow and even, while my mind ran in tight, frantic circles. I must have opened that message 100 times, staring at the little red drop on the map. It was miles beyond anything familiar, past the last row of gas stations, past the industrial sprawl, all the way into that stretch of highway where cell service starts to flicker. Nothing out there but abandoned buildings, farmland, and the occasional truck stop that never looks entirely open. The next day at work was torture. I couldn't concentrate, couldn't remember half the conversations I had, and my phone kept burning a hole in my pocket. By the time I clocked out, the sun was already slipping behind the rooftops, painting the sky in deep red streaks that made the whole evening feel like the setup for something I wasn't ready to face. At 8:15, I left the house without telling Clarissa where I was going. She was in the living room, scrolling her phone, wrapped in the same scarf from the photo. I caught her looking at me as I grabbed my jacket, her eyebrows twitching like she wanted to ask, but she didn't. That almost made it worse. The way she just let me go without a word, as if she already knew where I was headed. The roads thinned out the further I drove. Street lights turned to darkness, and the occasional roadside sign loomed out of the black like a warning. My GPS led me down a narrow gravel lane that crackled under the tires. A gust of wind blew across the fields, carrying with it a faint smell of smoke, and I remember gripping the wheel so tightly that my knuckles ached. At exactly 9 o'clock, I pulled up to what the map claimed was the destination. It wasn't much to look at. A squat concrete structure, maybe an old utility building, its windows boarded and the paint long gone from the walls. One flickering light buzzed above the door, casting a pale yellow pool onto the dirt. And there, just barely visible in that dim light, was a figure leaning against the wall, hands in their pockets. I got out of the car slowly, the cold air immediately cutting through my jacket. The figure straightened when they saw me and stepped forward just enough for me to catch the outline of their face. It wasn't the man from the bar. It wasn't anyone I recognized. "You're late," the stranger said, voice low but firm. Then they nodded toward the door. "If you still want the truth, it's in there. But you're not going to like it." My throat was dry, but I stepped forward anyway. Because whatever was behind that door, I already had the sinking feeling it would be worse than anything I'd imagined. The stranger's voice still echoed in my head as I pushed open the heavy metal door. It groaned like it hadn't been used in years, and a stale, metallic smell hit me immediately. Inside, the air was colder than outside, and the only light came from a single hanging bulb swaying slightly, as if someone had just brushed past it. The floor was bare concrete, stained and cracked, and the walls were covered with peeling gray paint. No windows, just that bulb overhead, and a long table pushed up against the far wall. On the table were three things: a black folder, a cheap prepaid phone, and a small voice recorder. I didn't touch any of them right away. I just stood there, listening for movement, aware of every echo my own breathing made. "You've got 10 minutes, the stranger said from the doorway. He didn't come inside, didn't close the door, just leaned there, watching me. "After that, you're on your own." I opened the folder first. Inside were photographs, dozens of them. Clarissa in different places, a hotel lobby, a coffee shop, standing beside the black SUV I'd seen earlier. In some, she was alone, looking tense, almost guarded. In others, she was with the man from the bar, their heads close together, speaking like they didn't want anyone to overhear. The prepaid phone buzzed suddenly, startling me. I didn't even remember turning it on. A text flashed across the small screen. "She's been lying to both of you." I looked at the stranger, but his face didn't change. He just nodded at the voice recorder. My thumb hovered over the play button, and for a second, I thought about walking out without pressing it. But curiosity won. The recording crackled to life, and Clarissa's voice filled the room. She was speaking quickly, almost in a whisper. "He thinks I'm just keeping him in the dark about the money," she said, a nervous laugh under her words. "But if he knew what was actually in those files, he'd—" The recording cut off abruptly with the sound of a door slamming. I replayed it twice, each time feeling the same sick twist in my gut. Money? Files. None of this sounded like an affair anymore. It sounded like something much more complicated and a lot more dangerous. Before I could ask anything, the stranger stepped forward and shut the folder. "Time's up," he said flatly. "Go home. She'll tell you soon enough. Just be ready when she does." As I walked back to my car, I realized my hands were shaking, not just from what I'd heard, but from the creeping suspicion that this wasn't just about betrayal. This was about something Clarissa was involved in that I was never supposed to know existed. I didn't sleep that night, but this time it wasn't fear keeping me awake. It was the anticipation of whatever was about to happen. The stranger's warning echoed in my head. She'll tell you soon enough. Be ready. By morning, I decided I wasn't going to wait passively. If Clarissa had something to say, I wanted it on the table now. When she came into the kitchen, still in her robe, I slid the black folder across the table. For a second, her face was unreadable, but then something shifted in her eyes. Resignation, maybe relief. She sat down slowly, opened the folder, and didn't even flinch at the photos. I was going to tell you, she said quietly. But I couldn't, not until it was over. It turned out, there had been no affair. The man from the bar, the SUV, the secret meetings, they were part of a sting operation she'd been helping with. Months earlier, a former coworker of hers had been caught in something criminal. Embezzlement tied to a local development project, and because she had insider knowledge from her time in the company, the authorities approached her for help. The envelope she'd been holding that night contained the last set of documents they needed to close the case. The toast at the party, the comments about being invisible, the secrecy, they had all been part of her cover to make it believable that she was drifting away from me, so no one would suspect we were still close. She admitted it had been the hardest part, pretending I meant less to her than I did. The messages from the unknown number? She smiled faintly. One of the investigators. He said you were getting too close to stumbling into something dangerous, so he stepped in before you blew the operation. I sat there in silence for a long moment, the knots in my chest slowly unraveling. When I finally spoke, it came out as a half laugh, half sigh. So, you were never leaving me? Leaving you. She reached across the table and took my hand. I've been fighting to make sure I could come home to you without a shadow hanging over us. In the weeks that followed, the news broke about the arrests, and the whole story came out publicly. Minus the part about Clarissa's role, which was kept off the record. Life slipped back into something resembling normal, but better. The little tensions that had been growing between us before all this seemed to fade. We talked more. We laughed more. And every now and then, when she caught me watching her with that mix of suspicion and relief, she'd just shake her head, smile, and say, "You really didn't trust me, did you?" And I'd tell her the truth. I didn't know what to believe, but I'm glad I waited to find out. Because in the end, what I'd thought was the beginning of the end for us turned out to be proof that she was willing to risk everything, not to betray me, but to protect me.